Welcome back to the final lesson of VMware View Administration Training, Next Steps. So let's do a quick review of the topics we covered in this video series. We started off talking about the View components and licensing. This includes descriptions of the VMware View Connection Server, Security Server, Transfer Server, the View Agent, the View Client, and View Composer. We also talked about the bundle package of View and the differences between Enterprise and Premier versions. Then we talked about the installation of View and its different components, where I walked you through an actual installation within my own lab environment to show you the individual steps that it takes to install View. Then we configured some desktop pools within View. We discussed the best practices for the parent VM that we use to deploy our pools off of, the types of desktops that exist within the View infrastructure, including floating and dedicated pools, composer-based and non-composer-based pools, and manual and automated pools. We walked through all the different configuration options that the pools have. We quickly covered what link clones are, and then I walked you through the actual creation of a couple different types of pools. Then we talked about how to maintain these pools, including user entitlement, operations that we can complete on composer-based pools to maintain the desktop image, how to edit a pool and the changes you can make while editing it, and how to manage the user sessions when users connect to the desktops. Then we talked about the user profile and user data, including the base Windows user profile and the roaming profile version of it when you're running in an Active Directory domain, to allow the user to have access to that profile on any computer within the domain. We went over how to maintain the user profile to keep it nice and clean and avoid corruption. Then we talked about the user data and how you can use a persistent disk within a composer-based pool to maintain the user data from one session to the next, and also how to use folder redirection to do the same through Active Directory. We then talked about the local mode capability of VMware View, where you can download a virtual desktop onto your client machine and run it from that local machine, rather than on the server like a traditional VMware View desktop. We talked about the requirements that it takes to run this type of mode, what it takes to maintain that desktop, and some best practices around this infrastructure. After that, we talked about another special kind of desktop within View, the kiosk mode desktop, which is used when you want to have a client device automatically log in without any user interaction, which can be useful in many different use cases, particularly in our scenario where we want to have a computer terminal set up for customers to use within our retail store. I also showed you how to set it up both on the server side and on the client side, and some best practices on getting it set up. We then talked about printing within VMware View, some of the different options you have for setting up the printers within the virtual desktops, including VMware's special implementation of the .print technology to do location-based printing. Then we started a conversation about ThinApp, VMware's application virtualization technology. In the first half, we talked about how it works, what it takes to get it to work, some best practices around it, and then the actual process for packaging the ThinApp application. After that, we talked about how to deploy the ThinApp application to our desktops. Then we talked about how to monitor your View environment, where we set up the event database, took a look at the dashboards built into the View Administrator, and then took a close look at the different states that the desktops and user sessions can be in. In the troubleshooting section, I covered some of the common points of failure that the View infrastructure may experience, took a deep dive into the process of creating a desktop connection, creating linked clones, and the ports needed for the different components of a View infrastructure to connect to one another. We reviewed some of the PC over IP settings that can be used to tweak the PC over IP protocol performance, and then covered the location of the log files for the different components and how to collect diagnostic information of those components as well. And finally, I went through the VCA4 DT certification exam, talking about what it is, what it covers, and some tips that'll hopefully make your experience a lot better with the exam. Throughout these lessons, I used a live environment to show you exactly what everything looks like with an actual implementation of View. These real-world walkthroughs will hopefully make you feel confident enough to walk through it in your own environment and get View set up, configured, monitor, and maintain it all on your own. All these lessons lead up to the very first of VMware's desktop certifications, the VCA4 DT, which, as we discussed, is an entry-level desktop certification. It's the first certification in a path of 3 different certifications that VMware offers for the View product suite, which includes ThinApp. The next level up is the VCP4DT certification. This certification is aimed at system engineers and is more focused on the individual components of a View infrastructure, how to install them, and the many different configuration items you have for each one. Many of the topics that I covered within this lesson will also apply directly to the VCP4DT exam as well, but in many cases, a much deeper dive would be necessary. In order to take the VCP4DT certification exam, you will need to acquire a VCA4DT and a VCP4 certifications. If you're not familiar with the VCP4 certification, it's based around the vSphere product suite. So anyone attaining a VCP4DT certification will have the skills necessary to not only put in place and manage a View infrastructure, but also to be able to do the same for vSphere itself. Both these skill sets are necessary for an engineer-level View administrator, because the View infrastructure is so heavily dependent on the vSphere infrastructure that you build. The next step up from a VCP4DT is a VCAP4DT. This is more of an architect-level certification, and is designed for those who will be doing the requirements gathering and designing based on those requirements for a VMware View infrastructure. Clearly, this person would be an expert at VMware View and the vSphere infrastructure as well, and does require a VCP4DT certification. At the time of this recording, the VCAP4DT certification is not currently available. Its target is the fall of 2011, so depending on when you view this video, it may or may not be released yet. Let me leave you with a few resources that I've found invaluable over time working with VMware View. First of all is the View documentation. This includes many documents, including the administration guide I've referred to over and over again in this video series. Next is the VMware View community. If you have questions or issues that you don't quite understand, that's your best place to go, because that's where all the experts hang out, answering questions for other users, and other users that have had similar experiences can share that knowledge with you. Next, I would advise you to check out the local VMware user group, or VMUG, in your area. If you're not familiar with the VMUG, it's a way for IT professionals who deal with VMware products on a day-to-day basis to get together, share experiences, learn from one another, and learn from vendors who help to sponsor the meetings. If you have interest in VMware certifications, I would check out VMware's certification page, where they've got information not only about the desktop certifications, but also about the vSphere-based certifications as well. And finally, I've given you here 3 different links to different blogs that are VMware View-centric. Of course, there are many out there that discuss VMware View, but these 3 are particularly focused on VMware specifically. So that wraps up the VMware View Administration course. I greatly appreciate you taking the time with me to walk through all these lessons, and I would love to hear your feedback on what you thought about this training, the content within it, or just the general approach of TrainSignal. TrainSignal has made many different ways of sharing your opinion. Please use any or all of the avenues presented on this screen now to provide us the information you feel that would make TrainSignal even better for you. Once again, thank you very much, and good luck.